paying athletes, creators, gamers across 180 plus countries and 150 plus currencies with taxes and KYC handled? Sounds impossible, huh? Until you talk to my guest today. He started in esports, saw payouts was broken, and built a platform to fix it. Welcome, FinTech Talkers, to another edition of the FinTech Talk Show. I'm your host, Patty. Today, we're joined by Han Park, founder and CEO of Payment Labs, on a mission to let any business pay anyone, anywhere compliantly. They've been in the news for powering payments across sports, esports, the creator economy, and NIL, or name, image, and likeness. And they just announced a new 3.25 million seed round led by Aperture Venture Capital, also a friend of the show. Han, great to have you and welcome to the FinTech Talk Show.
Thank you for having me, Patty. Excited to talk to you today.
Awesome, and congratulations again on the seed round. We'll talk about that. But before we get into all that and Payment Labs, I wanted to just ask you a little bit, describe about yourself to our audience, including anything you want to say that you do outside of work that you're passionate about.
Sure. I've been a serial entrepreneur, mostly in the video gaming and competitive video gaming space, which we know now as esports. But my roots actually go back to Idaho. We immigrated there, grew up there, and then I went to the school on the East Coast. Wall Street called me after school and got into banking. And then moved on to looking at the startup ecosystem when I was at Samsung. At that time, I got introduced to video gaming as a form of sports entertainment. It's just, competitors playing at the highest level, but on a digital playfield. And what was happening in Korea fascinated me because I grew up playing sports and was a very passionate sports viewer as well. And so I saw what was happening with the competitive video gaming that was developing in Korea, and I thought, man, this is going to be the future of sports entertainment. And so I pretty much invested my past 30 years of my life in that ecosystem. And then what I'm building today actually came out of ideas and challenges that I faced while I was working in that industry.
Oh, how fascinating. So you bring the global perspective to this too. So you had the exposure in the East, specifically Korea. I know Korea and Japan, I think, and maybe the rest of Asia are big in sports and esports.
Yes.
Um, and so you had that kind of global perspective and you brought that. And we say everything is very advanced in the US, but it is not, and maybe we'll find out. And that's probably why you're innovating in this space.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Even when I was at Samsung and I was talking to my bosses who were the key executives that were, investing into Samsung's future beyond just electronics and commodities. And I had told them, wow, what's happening in Seoul and in South Korea and nearby Asian countries where people are watching other people play video games. Imagine 20 years ago when you're talking to, seasoned executives that go video games, who's going to watch other people play video games as entertainment? And that's where I go, okay, time to look at innovation and ride the future trends. But to what you pointed out, like, Korea was much accelerated when it came to, rich content and multiplayer gaming than the US because of the fact that Korea is a very small, country that had vertical high rises and concentrated populations in metropolitan areas. And so they actually had more broadband access when we were still on AOL dial-up. And so they got to be ahead of the curve in doing these type of gaming activities and events around digital entertainment, right? And
Yeah.
so that's where I said, okay, you know what? The US will be there. And sure enough, now US is leading in all that consumer and content around technology. And
Yeah.
so just I was only 20 years ahead of the time.
No, you're being modest, but no, that's great. And I know we want to talk about kind of the fintech aspect or the payments aspect of esports. My audience is I think somewhat aware. I've done some shows on esports and metaverse actually, but maybe let's establish some foundation, right? And you alluded to that, right? Watching people play video games, right? Is that really a monetizing? Is that really a business opportunity? So kind of set the foundation on what's that broad opportunity of esports, spectators watching other people play video games. How big is that? And what is the kind of the growth before we kind of get into the friction and the payments aspect?
Yeah, no, that's it's a good setup in the context of like why I even started businesses within that ecosystem. So, again, the thesis where what are the youth, the future, leaders of tomorrow? What do they spend their time when they're growing up, right? Traditionally, even 20 years ago, oftentimes it was sports, right? Whether it was through your school activity sports or outside of school, you had your travel clubs and you played specific sports, and that was kind of the physical activity. But kids of I would say the last 20 years have been growing up playing video games, right? And what's amazing about video games is that even though it's skill based to be a very good gamer, it's actually open to all to play, right? And as long as you have some sort of device that's connected to the internet, you can play against other people or play with other people. And the fact that it's globally pervasive and it resonates with all youth around the world, it's not a sport that, is regional specific and has popularity just within that country or that, continent. Esports is global in the sense that there's multiple game titles, different types of games, and different types of competitions. So it's very inclusive to any youth that's growing up playing games. And one thing that I always say is if you're looking at where the future market is going to be, there's more kids today that understand the complex rules behind Riot's League of Legends than there are people that act, kids that are playing Little League baseball and the complicated rules around baseball, right? And so, where's your future consumers and technology users going to be, and what are they going to be watching as the future of sports entertainment? So, if you're going to bet on the future of sports entertainment, video game content and competitions have to be part of that equation. And that was my thesis, 20 some years ago.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And I can see it's almost like a parallel development, right? There's physical sports like you talked about, but now with the internet and the distribution and the technology and the bandwidth, now esports or video games and the world population is the audience. So I think the exponential factor is huge in
Yes.
compared to kind of physical sports almost, right? So you were an esports executive before a current fintech founder. So where did you see? So obviously the growth trajectory was huge, but where did you see what was wrong with kind of the payment and the commercialization and the tournament payouts perspective? And when did you realize that that was a company?
Yeah. So when I was running one of the largest independent esports companies that were organizing these competitions, both online and filling out stadiums, right, with of these video game competitions around the highest performing gamers that we brought from all over the world to compete on a stage or in a studio and broadcasting that content out through massive viewership of fans that are following both the teams, the players, and the game itself over the web. It allowed us to create kind of a model that said, how do we monetize this, rabid fan engagement and viewership, right? Most sports, traditional sports, would be happy to have like 1/10 of the viewership that we get from a world championship gaming event because of the fact that the distribution is through, internet tech, right? And so Where I saw the challenges is that while we were the biggest independent esports company, we also worked with 60 different developers and publishers running their specific esports programs for their game IP. So, when we do like the League of Legends studio broadcast matches or even their live events, Riot Games would work with us to help kind of produce the event and then broadcast it out to the audience. And so, working with these different publishers early in the development of the whole esports ecosystem, we also had the responsibility when they announced prize money attached to the events that after the event is done, we had to get the prize money out to all the winners that competed in these competitions or tournaments or seasons, right? Um, and here's where the break happens. Um, the esports and competitive gamers are, first of all, it's global in nature. Esports is global in nature. So these gamers are from all over the world. And that's what's beautiful about esports is the fact that it's open to everyone. But it also brings challenges when you come to how do you pay that person, right? And also, these gamers tend to be more in the younger demographic, right? Primarily, probably 16 to 25 years old, that often have never had a bank account or have never had a job before, and they just won a decent sum of money, and they go, "Well, where's my money?" They don't understand there's a process of onboarding and putting your information and delivering your information so that you could get paid. So you had two challenges. Esports was global in nature, and a lot of the gamers that you were paying out to after these competitions didn't know what onboarding or what process it took for them to actually receive their prize winnings. And that created a nightmare of challenges for us because we spend months preparing for a major event to really execute well and get our viewership and make our sponsors and the game publishers happy with our competitions. But then after that success of that event and everyone's on a high because we just broke records with viewership and it was the most amazing production and energy, we had to now work to onboard all those winners onto our financial systems and then figure out how do we get the prize money in their hands in a decent amount of time where they're not going to blow us up on social media of why money they haven't been paid or blame our sponsors or publishers. And that's kind of the primary, I would say, black issue within the overall esports ecosystem because of the fact that there's direct correlations with quality of event and viewership, with the amount of prize money associated with that event. And now we got gamers that are winning millions of dollars,
Wow.
at a single event. And if you don't get them paid fast enough, they're going on social to tell you what's wrong with that system or event.
Yeah. No, so this is big, and you alluded to this, right? You led Turtle Entertainment America, part of ESL Gaming. And for those who don't know, ESL Gaming was one of the largest, or maybe the largest esports company that sold, I think, for $1 billion in 2022. So that kind of shaped. So you saw this friction of this post-game thing that you described, where the winners had to be paid out, and they were from all over the world, and they didn't know about all this onboarding KYC, and it's a multi-currency issue. So before we kind of double click on that and drill down on how your platform addresses it, can you describe the ecosystem a little bit? So I think you talked about ESL, Turtle Entertainment, all these esports providers, and then you talked about 60 plus kind of people who were kind of contributing to that for the experience and stuff. And they're obviously the players and then the audience. So kind of describe the different parties that at least are part of the commerce.
Yeah, so it starts with, when I say the developers and publishers that we worked with, these are the game makers, right? The
Got
games
it.
that are very popular that the gamers actually play. So
Mhm.
they own the IP. And as the game matures and becomes very popular, and then there's competitive features around that game and it's multiplayer, that's when you can start organizing competitions around that specific game. So now you have the gaming community that either plays actively in the game, and if they're not playing the game, they're watching other people play that game, across Twitch and YouTube, and watching a lot of that content. And so now it forms this entire ecosystem, or let's say more of a gaming vertical within the overall video game space, which is a big popular one would be like Counter-Strike. It's been around for 25 plus years, yet it's still considered one of the best esports titles because of the fact that it's survived generations and decades of a gaming evolution, but you still have a rabid fan base that actually plays and follows what's going on at the professional level. So once you have that built community and an ecosystem that promotes competitive gaming, that essentially builds a pyramid, right? You got the pros at the top, then you got kind of like amateur type leagues that feed into the pro system, and then you got your entire base of gamers that are all participants within that gaming ecosystem. That is where you're trying to monetize ultimately on behalf of the publisher, the sponsors that want to reach those gamers. So that's where competitions come about. So you got all these players that are involved in the ecosystem, from the tournament organizer that organizes the event, the game publishers and developers that own the game itself, and then the gaming community, which are consumers and participants of that, the gaming activities and in-game sales and all this. So why does esports exist? Because it creates longevity and popularity of the game beyond just the initial sale of the game, because of the fact that there's community built around it. And that's why esports really took off, because the massive viewership and reach that, Twitch and YouTube and other content, providers enabled to around these gaming competitions.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's the ecosystem. But what happens within it? Well, to organize and get the massive viewership and get everybody's attention to it, usually what happens is the game publisher and the sponsors of the tournament organizers throw massive prize pool money. There are times where a single tournament was paying out $40 million to a team, of five, right? And they became instant millionaires by winning this tournament series. That's what was happening in esports.
Wow. So it's almost like professional sports, right? We talk about professional tennis and things like that. And even though it looks pretty fancy, only very few percentage of people who want to go pro tennis actually make any money out of it.
Right.
But what you're describing in esports is more democratic. There are more people, and skill is involved, but it is attracting a larger population. So the total TAM in this space is huge.
Yes. And that's another thing too. And you nailed it, which is it's an open democratized system. So you can have multiple competitions at different levels. And so it's not always about, the $1 million prize pool. There's competitions happening almost daily and on every weekend somewhere in the world around certain game titles. And the prize pool could be as big as, $100, right? But it allows people to compete and have a chance to, win prize money. And there's their problem is the massive amount of payments that exist, because you're organizing everything from small online cups where people are winning $25, but that winner might be some, 16-year-old kid in Vietnam, right? All the way to a team of four that just won the Halo World Championships, where they each won $100,000. But that team consists of a professional gamer from Brazil, a professional gamer from Mexico, out of the US and Canada. That's the team. And now you got to think about, how do you move $100,000 cross border to these individuals, and can they receive that payment? And there's the payment issues.
Yeah, very very interesting. So we've established good foundation. So we talked about the esports opportunity, why it's big. We just talked about it being a democratized kind of sports and entertainment in many ways, bringing in a lot of people around the globe to it. Um, we talked about the ecosystem, the different players, and the friction, you briefly alluded to it, around payouts, because this is not a simple kind of giving a check to someone who is physically winning a tournament. It's all virtual, it's across the globe, and people in some cases may not even have a bank account. So you witnessed this in your previous career and then saw the pain point and Payment Labs was born, looks like. So in plain terms, what does Payment Labs do?
Yeah, so what we allow, our platform exists because we allow anybody, and anybody meaning whether they're a tournament organizer, game publisher, a sports league, or even a sports team, right? If they have to pay their international base of athletes or gamers or even talent or, anyone that's all over the world where they have to pay, we make it simple and easy and remove the complexity around compliance, which often creates the friction when you do global payments. So
Wow.
what does our platform, how does our platform work is we have the technology, our software integrates with all these global financial institutions to enable the payment routes, optimizes the purpose and the use of those payments and how they should flow. We make it efficient, and then we integrate with those institutions to make sure that we have the payment methods that are actually available to the end payee, regardless of the starting source, whether it's USD or Euro that the organizer, our customer, would be paying. So we have those integrations, but then we add a compliance layer on top because, where we found oftentimes where payments get held or become expensive is when you have to deal with compliance. Compliance is the reason why a lot of payments are slow, become very expensive, and time consuming to actually get it to them. And so we, really specialized on working with our global financial partners to make sure that our compliance stack is in line with, global financial institutional requirements, whether it's at, government levels, at the country, government levels, financial institution levels, and even at the local bank level for each of the payees. Payments is a highly regulated industry, and compliance is one of the secret sauce pieces of our platform that we added as part of the payment process itself. And then you add one more thing to it, which is the tax modules. Unlike other platforms where, tax information is collected sometimes, after the payment is made, we actually make the payment, the tax information collection and verifying and, making sure that all of that information is correct against not only the tax jurisdictions that we have to be in line with and under those regulations, but also with the individual and the pair of record, right, which are our customers. And so having these complex tax modules to navigate that as part of the payment actually makes it more efficient overall on a regular use basis than to collect all that and handling it separately outside of the payment platform.
Wow.
So it does a lot behind the scenes. People think that payments are easy, but when you look at where all the friction and logistics headaches and manual inefficiencies are, it's broken down into those three areas.
Yeah. So in summary, a pay-ins and payout software layer with embedded identity, tax, and compliance that works globally. 180 countries and 150 plus currencies. Wow, that's amazing. And if I were, meaning I work in fintech, I talk to a lot of founders and know the space well. I would say you are the Stripe for sports or esports, or you built the Stripe for, as Stripe is for e-commerce, Payment Labs is for esports and sports.
Yep, and that's actually our positioning and our vertical focus is there's a lot of broader payment platforms, right? That's kind of like they say, here's our platform, regardless of what industry you may be in, utilize our platform, the way we structured it. But we took a different approach where we wanted to be very purposely built and vertically focused. It started with solving a gaming problem, a payments in the esports world problem, because that's where I came from and I knew where there were real challenges that had to be addressed. But arguably, the payment complexity when it came to esports is probably harder than other industries because of the demographic and the pervasiveness, of where these gamers are all over the world created a lot of challenges. So what we have built as an esports solution actually translated really well to the world of sports, where a lot of these sports organizers and leagues are also global in nature, where they have international athletes participating because it's an internationally popular sport. Look at content creators, right? They're globally spread, and they're also individuals oftentimes, right? They may not be attached to some major talent agency or any or some representatives, and they represent themselves, and they're able to work for big platforms and big sponsors and brands, but yet they're an individual that also has this challenge of I need to receive money if I'm not from the US and I'm servicing a US brand or customer. And so this in the new global digital economy, global payments and to do it simpler, faster, and cheaper is critical to for the movement of money to get those ecosystems building, moving right.
No, fascinating. And the coverage is humongous, man. I'm sure this is a lot of work, Han. And maybe talk a little bit about the we talk about the 180 plus countries, 150 plus currencies. So what rails, and you briefly alluded to it that you work locally with the local rails, but what rails and partners make that possible and make that real? And are there any limits?
Yeah. I won't go into specific partner names, but I'll describe how they are overall because we have multiple partners for multiple purposes, right? So let's start with pay-ins, right? Oftentimes, you look at, payment processors like a Stripe who actually they takes the card swipe, but that payment information is actually passed on to acquiring networks, the essentially the backbone of how card acquisitions work, right? And the big acquiring networks, we have the same relationships with the biggest ones, right? And we're integrated directly. It's just how we present the pay-in solution is different than how Stripe does it. And what we've built in terms of a pay-in solution is more nuanced towards serving the actual challenges that like organizers or video game tournament organizers have, which often is tied to compliance, because oftentimes the larger card acquiring networks will not understand what the purpose of that payment was, right? And then when you try to explain to them that, oh, it's an entry fee for a tournament where on video games where they, all of a sudden you get classified as high risk, and then your limitations across available card processors get smaller, right? But we take a different approach. We already fought that case on behalf of the industries that we're targeting. So sports, emerging sports, esports, content creation. And we already have those traditional banking partners, the acquiring networks, as our pay-in providers. And so we're able to be that technology layer that interfaces with those large acquiring networks for our customers so they don't have to do it themselves. And on the payout side, it's, your global FX financial institutions, right? That does the currency exchange and delivers it locally to the currency that, the end payee or the end business can receive. Well, there's processes along the way. It's not about just sending the money. You have to have a ledger system, right, to transmit the US dollar equivalent. The FX bank comes in and has to do the conversion, across what the conversion rates are, plus their markup. And all of that is where we go, okay, not only do we need one partner, but we need multiple partners because certain, FX banks are great at certain, region to region coverage, what we call corridors and routes, but they may not cover everyone, right? So someone that's great in covering, let's say, Europe to Asia may not have the most optimal and efficient and cheaper, routes to like someone in Tanzania. if you have a pay. So you have to to have global coverage, you got to work with multiple FX banks and make sure that they're integrated. And my Payment Lab software optimizes those routes based on the use case, based on who the where the source of the funds are, which was our customer. So there's a lot of rules and how the sausage is made that our software does intelligently. And that's how you have to build it as a tech stack, is that you have to integrate with the biggest global financial partners to make it all work for pay-ins and payouts.
Yeah, looks like a Percher and Garnett, and we know Garnett. He's your main investor from Percher Venture Capital. It looks like he's hit a gold mine. I'm surprised you didn't have the networks and other big institutions coming to be part of your round. Maybe they'll come in the next round once you're on my podcast and get the word out. But that's huge. The plumbing that you described, meaning that's a lot of asset right there. And yeah, you need the cash flow and the customers and the process of transaction, which I think you're doing. And so that's great. And let's talk a little bit about that. Maybe the transaction you list Microsoft, Sega, X Games as reference customers on your website. So what problems are you solving for each? Is it prizes, royalties, NIL, the name, image, likeness deals, or micropayments, or all of the above? Can you kind of talk at a high level?
Yeah, so that's where again we have the advantage because we come from that industry, those industries, or we understand the flow of funds within those industries, where the friction and pain points are. So our overall solution, and our tech stack plus our compliance and our live support that addresses some of the more complex transactions, um, is very nuanced to not only within a specific sports vertical or specific esports organizer, right? But it's also customer specific because oftentimes the customer has already some antiquated or legacy way of or having to do this because it's part of their organizational business, right? To send out payments and to receive payments. So they had to have some systems in place to be, how they currently run their businesses. What we're finding is that it's not efficient. Oftentimes, a lot of our customers are using three or more processors to deal with different aspects of their payment challenges. On top of that, they're using, third-party accounting firms and tax firms to deal with the complexities around compliance and liabilities, right? And so all of that is very highly inefficient. And then you add the layer of, support. When you're dealing with a lot of individual payees, you're getting a lot of questions about where's my money? How come I haven't received it yet? And our customers, they need to focus on what their primary core business is. It's either throwing the biggest, video gaming event in the world or building the biggest, pickleball league, right? So our customers across the board, whether they're a game publisher like a Microsoft or a big, tournament organizer that, that organizes these events on behalf of brands, or they're a sports league, they all have different friction because of the fact that they already have some legacy systems in place. What we are positioning is our tech stack, our compliance layer, our tax module, and our support can resolve a lot of your headaches, but we want to understand which headaches do you want resolved first to make it even easier, more efficient, and simpler of how you're currently doing things. And then ultimately, when we build that trust and credibility with them in tackling the primary pain points, we want to be their trusted infrastructure provider and do everything payments. And that's where, what Stripe did for e-commerce. I want Payment Labs to really be the solution that everyone in sports or esports or the creator economy will come to first, knowing that we service their specific industries, their verticals, and understand the flow of funds challenges that they have, and then we can help address it.
Wow. No, that is amazing. And I see that big opportunity. Well, like we kind of talked about the big opportunity and the lack of a solution and the friction, especially with the global aspect and the tax and other angles. So no, this is huge, Han. And we talked about the opportunity, we talked about the product, but I see a different view as well. You're not just a product, you're kind of a category. And yes, the esports and that angle, but also of this new trend, and we've talked about in the show of kind of verticalized embedded finance. So, and broadly fintech itself, right? So fintech is moving from a horizontal toolkit to vertical workflow platforms and embedding itself in the different systems, in your case, kind of in esports platforms and such. So, looks like that's what you are, and you are in that category. Your Payment Labs fits into that category very well. So, talk a little bit to the drivers of that and why that is happening and why potentially this is big.
Yeah. So with esports, when we first did the first iteration of the company, at that time we called it price payments because we were just solving the price disbursement problem that I personally dealt with, right? The driver of that industry was that it blew up in 5 years from, competitive gaming, and then all of a sudden Twitch came onto the scene to enable, online viewership and content generation around this type of content. And then all of a sudden, these events were happening at stadiums, filling out, massive stadiums, 30,000 people watching competitive gaming on stage with big productions and broadcasting it across not only Twitch, but you were seeing it on linear TV as well, right?
Mhm.
So the massive growth of esports equated to, as we talked earlier in the conversation, just the massive amount of prize money that was pooling up and then having to be dispersed back to the gamers created that problem of like, if it grew over time and slowly, it could have been tackled, in phases. But the fact that it became just so popular and so much money was being thrown into the prize pools and going back out to the gamers was the driver of it. There, you needed a solution. Everyone was kind of like I was describing, using, 4 or 5 different payment providers, their, current legacy bank, trying to figure it all out, using PayPal sometimes, and then,
Uh-huh.
other methods that were probably not compliant, right? When it comes to paying taxable income across borders. Anyways, that was the driver of that. But what we've seen, especially in the sports and the creator economy, was actually the global lockdown. During the pandemic, a lot of people content became content creators, right? To create supplemental income when there wasn't that much work to do. And so a lot of people that worked at companies started working for themselves. The whole gig economy exploded during that time. And so as we came out of the lockdown, they saw success as streamers, content creators, talent, right? Or Uber drivers, right? They kind of understood that they could work for themselves. And so now this gig economy is exploding, right? It's what is it going to be, like 20 trillion or something on a
Yeah.
global level,
Yeah.
right? And so now you got a lot of individuals that are servicing a lot of companies on a global basis. And so they become global payees to a lot of different payment platforms. And then post pandemic, right, during the lockdown, pretty much the sports world shut down, right? The only thing that went online was video gaming and video gaming competitions. Streaming obviously took off, for the content providers like Netflix and such because they had such a captive audience. But if you weren't watching Netflix or other, streamers, you were probably playing games, and that included, adults that had to play games with their kids to just keep themselves entertained, right? But the world of sports actually transformed coming out of it. Coming out of lockdowns, also in sports became enabled, right? Even these, I would consider them passion or weekend or hobby sports. People came out of it wanting to, essentially connect with other people, right? And that need to share their experiences by either playing with each other or, watching social, sporting events together came back roaring. But what changed and why that became a driver for our business in the world of sports is that you couldn't do payments the way you used to prior to the pandemic, which oftentimes was cash credit card, and physical checks. The push for modernization and digital payments is what's accelerating the opportunity in the world of sports because everyone now is used to Venmoing their money, right? Cashless systems to process transactions, everything is fast. But now, how do you tackle that on a global level? And that's where we're looking at as us being the de facto or the solution provider that can help sports organizations to modernize quickly, to handle their business the way they did it prior to, the lockdown, but now have a digital infrastructure to deal with the payment challenges that they currently are facing.
Wow. So it's almost a perfect storm you described, right? So there was more and more movement towards digital or esports and video games in the pandemic. I know we talk about pandemic in terms of vaccines and other things and how they missed it and the public health, but these kind of behavior changes at scale, like the one aspect you described, and there's some others too. There was demographic shifts, like
Yeah.
people moved from big metropolis to outside and things like that. And I think we're still living through that. And one classic example is kind of the movement to this form of entertainment. And you mentioned Netflix, and I think not recently, but maybe a couple of years ago, I think Netflix started a vertical into sports, right? And games and esports. So obviously they're a big company and they looked at this as a potential high growth space for them. I haven't tracked as to how they're doing and how many active people they have on their platform and things, but it's a perfect storm, and I think Payment Labs is well poised to capitalize on this kind of almost explosive growth you might see or already seeing in this space.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why we went out and raised our first institutional round, right? It took us time to kind of bootstrap and figure out, see our product market fit, and then also getting market validation. But in the last 2 years, as we started, servicing these emerging sports leagues, right? Last 8 of 10 customers came from the sports world because this push for modernization of their payments infrastructure, having more streamlined and automated solutions when it comes to different methods they can enable, but also removing those complexities around taxes and compliance, which they were spending a lot of internal resources and time on. Throwing bodies at it wasn't a solution when in the modern digital banking world now, fintech through AI, sorry, API capabilities and integrations with legacy banks allow you to do the things that were manually inefficient, streamlined through software, and that's where our positioning is.
Gotcha. And so you raised the fundraising, and I like to plug in Garnett. He's a good friend and a Percher. But congrats again on the lead from a Percher VC. Incredibly smart guy and team. Why were the right lead? And where, and you alluded to it a little bit, where does the capital go? Kind of product compliance, go to market. And on the backside, I'll talk a little bit more about your go to market, but go ahead and tell me why Aperture.
Yeah. So I'll tell a short story here, just to give you that context. So, and Garnett might probably have a variation of it, but Garnett Harriman is our from Aperture Venture Capital is our lead VC. They are a fintech fund based out of Philly and the West Coast. And Garnett, his version of the story was that he's had this thesis that sports is going to go through a modernization change and payments and infrastructure is going to be central to this growth in sports over time, right? And you're starting to see it everywhere where people are investing into sports tech, sports IP, and the sports leagues and properties themselves, right? And so a lot of new funds have been announced. A lot of things are happening in the world of sports, everything from, collegiate sports now paying student athletes because of NIL, the name, image, likeness, and the NCAA rev share that needs, is filtering down from the media, the different media companies to the conferences to the university and now the student athlete, right? So the world of sports, if you really look at every sports layer, whether it's Major League, global sports, or emerging pro-am sports, and then you got your collegiate sports and even youth sports. There's a lot of payment fragmentation that's going on. A lot of ubiquitous and larger, broader payment platforms touch a piece of it, but there isn't a vertically purpose-built, solution that addresses how those flow of funds work within each of those sports verticals and horizontal segments. And that's where Garnett had the thesis that he as a fintech investor, is going to look at where sports intersects with payments and fintech. Um, and his version of the story was that he's been reaching out to me for a year and I've been ignoring him. But that's I don't think that was true. Like we met at a dinner. I literally, at my presentation, I said two sentences. I said what I'm building, what Stripe did for e-commerce, I want to do for the world of sports by building a payments infrastructure.
Mhm.
And we connected, and he said, I had this thesis before you even started. And so we were able to get together and then round up the other investors. That made sense to do the seed stage. And we closed the round, and now we're executing.
Yeah, no, it was meant to be. Yeah, it takes some of these things take time, but it was meant to be, and it's great that you found somebody who kind of believes kind of what you believe in or your kind of mission vision. So I think those are the best investor founder partnerships where there's that alignment in how they
Absolutely.
see, yeah, how they see the future of the world. You mentioned about NIL, and that's a personal interest to me because I have a child in NCAA now. But I'll come to it. I said that I'll talk to you about a GTM, go to market. Um, all what you're building is great, but eventually success comes from go to market and having a very smart distribution network. So how do you go about this in this case? You land with event operators, leagues, agencies, or who's your distribution?
Yeah. So let's look at the collegiate market, right? Because of your interest in there. And it's been kind of trying to uncover the wild west of things because, it's only been only a few years where NIL started exploding, right? And now it's growing fast and massive. And it's only been this year where the NCAA, rulings happened that allowed universities to pay their student athletes directly. So no one knows the solution. No one knows what the standards and regulations will be when it comes to, that entire ecosystem. Um, but that ecosystem consists of, right? You've got your, conferences, then you have your universities, and the universities often have like the booster aspects of it, which is the collectives. And all of that are the groups that are responsible for paying the student athletes, right? But when you look at where sponsorship and media convergence is, there's often a lot of pay to play initiatives, right? Having a big brand, financial partner making a big investment into, the collegiate space to try to own this whole payments infrastructure is one way. Another is, oh, there's a lot of software management that's around, the athlete compliance, right? That's trying to get into the payments aspect of it is another way. So what we found is that where our focus and specialty is moving money, doing the payments, ultimately, all of this over time is going to distill down to the fact that these student athletes need to get paid. That's a payment problem.
Mhm.
And so, what is the most optimal and probably most compliant way to pay these student athletes? This is not scholarship management. They're not your employees. They're receiving taxable income from either the conferences, the universities, the agencies that manage them, and then also the collectives that are paying the big NIL dollars to, high profiled athletes, right? So where we see this, it's the Wild West still, and no one's kind of figured it out, and there's no standard yet. So there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of different payment processors, platforms like us, other platforms that do, let's say, more athletic, department management. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And so where we're holding a firm and playing the long game is that ultimately this is going to distill over time down to a payments infrastructure problem.
Yeah, yeah. No, fascinating, and that would be a good integration point for you. Let's kind of drill down. And you talked about the changing kind of dynamics in NIL and conferences and NCAA payments. So there was a Supreme Court opinion, I want to say a couple of years ago, where some NCAA athletes sued, but without getting into too much detail. So talk about the change because I know a lot of people are in high school and college sports, elite athletes. Um, um, so now, previously it was that student athletes cannot monetize their participation because they're studying and they're in a college and or in a high school. But now with the Supreme Court decision, things have changed. So kind of just bring us up to speed briefly, Han, because you're very super close to this issue. So I want to just hear from you.
Yeah, so especially with NIL, the name, image, likeness, right? Essentially athletes, and a lot of it is based on their, popularity, but that's driven by their performance on the field, right? And so they have the opportunity to monetize and make money around their, brand. It's not about the actual winning prize money or being on a specific team and they get an X amount of dollars, as a contract. It's about building their brand and getting paid for that brand whenever that brand is being used or licensed or deployed. Um, and so Garnett actually has a good term for this. He's calling it the sportsfluencer, right? The
Okay.
convergence of sports, the
Mm-hmm.
athlete, and influencer. These are content creators now, right? That can leverage their presence within the sport and receive funds for it. And that sportsfluencer economy is actually what's driving a lot of the payment needs, because they are, whether they're a student or not, they're a high profiled athletes that are getting paid. And they can leverage their brand to get paid even, millions of dollars, maybe even more than what they would sign as a professional athlete on a rookie contract, right? During their college, even high school days, depending on, how well they're doing and how well they build their brand. So that where the opportunity really in the collegiate space is the fact that the NIL opportunity opened up, right? Where, it was a Supreme Court ruling that said student athletes should be able to monetize. But then came the NCAA lawsuits that said, well, we as former athletes couldn't, monetize when we were at school. So you guys owe us all of this revenue that was generated from media and sponsorships, leveraging our hard work while we were playing for your teams, right? Or for your university. So now, moving forward, the universities under this House versus NCAA and a couple of other lawsuits that the NCAA settled requires schools that opt into this, into the ruling, that they are going to have to pay the student athletes, on top of whatever scholarship and other things that have been committed to that athlete attending that school. They're getting paid. And so the world of collegiate sports is really opening up. And as that sportsfluencer, economy continues to grow in the next 5 to 10 years, all it is increasing the number of payments. And that's how we're like going, wow, it's gonna, grow. It's gonna escalate to numbers that we can't even fathom at this point because of the popularity of collegiate and high school sports.
Yeah, it's music to your ears. Obviously, this will just explode, right? And
Exponentially, yeah.
yeah, exponentially. And what I think about this is obviously both our kids kind of play and do sports and stuff, and I kind of see talk about chronic diseases, obesity, and especially younger generations and stuff, and people don't play so much sports. And now this might serve as an incentive, and these role models, right? The NIL will create that brand. Well, obviously the elite athletes, they'll always be there and they'll have the biggest brand. But this will bring into mainstream the tier two and tier three athletes, and
Yep.
it's changed the kind of the perception that hey, sports is not just kind of for playing, meaning it could monetize. You can kind of build some business out of it or as a part-time kind of gig, right? And the consequence could be kind of better health outcomes for a lot of things. So this is overall, yeah, this is great. Like this will exponentially improve a lot of money movement. So your platform will be used for a lot of this. But I think this is just a good step for letting athletes kind of be little mini startups or mini entrepreneurs trying to monetize their performance.
Yep. And the performance, but also, the work that they actually put in, right? Creating content, driving popularity, viewers, right? It's more than just their performance if they don't create the content that actually builds the brand. Uh, and so they can work, just like you said, they're going to be entrepreneurs. Some are going to be more successful than others. Some of them are going to be driven on the field. Some of them are going to be the best content creators because of the fact that they've been able to play on the field and represent and associate themselves to with a school, a popular school and such. So this economy is going to continue to grow and blow up.
Yeah. And I can't but talk about pickleball because I play competitive pickleball. It's still amateur, but kind of competitive tournaments and that kind of stuff. And I hear from girls who are in high school, flag football is taking off. And I attended a conference where they talked about that NFL is partnering with flag football because it's bringing into a lot of diverse communities and stuff like that. They had a big ad, I think, in NFL a couple of
Yeah.
years ago with this captain from Mexico national team in flag football. It was a very interesting ad. It's like a long
And
ad.
they're supported by the NFL.
Yeah,
So,
they are. They are. They are. So, just to ask about what I brand them as emerging sports, right? And they're taking off. Yeah, football, NFL, and basketball, NBA, and baseball is not going away. But some of these emerging sports are taking off. And it is good business for you because I know pickleball has a lot of tournaments and payouts and stuff. And I saw on your website that you played 454 athletes across 11 tournaments and streamline that. That was done very in a short amount of effort. So what's your perspective on all this? Meaning, obviously, it's a big business opportunity maybe for Payment Labs, but how do you see the world of sports evolving with some of these emerging sports outside of esports?
yeah, so emerging sports is where actually we're getting the most traction, right? What's amazing about emerging sports is it's fueled by people's passion and interest. And again, our thesis around sports is that it's the need for humans to connect each other, especially coming out of the pandemic and lockdowns, through shared experiences, whether it's playing with each other or watching together a sporting event. It's all about that. And payments is one of the underlying solutions to remove friction in those human connections, right? In the world of sports, you're constantly, as a viewer, you're buying, or if you're a player, you're paying participant tournament fees and such, right? But on the flip side, if you're, constantly winning and you're ranking up to the pros, you're also getting paid, right? So the money movement within these emerging sports is actually massive because it's fueled by the members, the fans, paying into the system, right? And then it's going back out to the winners of these competitions and those that are moving up the food chain in terms of building their careers around potentially professional, right? There's professional pickleball players, there's professional disc golf players, so all these emerging sports that are built around passion and shared emotions uh, is amazing growth. Now, why we see that as a huge opportunity for us is while they're growing and scaling fast and potentially scaling internationally, right? It drives payment challenges very quickly because what they need are the solutions that the major league sports and global sports federation already in place, but they don't have the budgets and personnel to operate like the major league sports. So does it make sense to use software and our platform to make it simpler, cheaper, and faster, right? Than the way of doing it off of spreadsheet and dealing with payment support and collecting confidential information that puts your entire business or organization at risk. That's why we're getting great traction with some of the fastest emerging sports leagues now. It makes sense to them because they understand the value of payments infrastructure to their growth and success.
Wow. Yeah. No, I enjoy it, and like going, not to overuse the word democratizing or democratizing, but pickleball, for example, has that done for racket sports, bringing in a lot of new players. And so I can see it only growing. But yeah, it's great the way you articulate it. It's a big, big business opportunity, as well. And you're looks like you're capitalizing on it.
Oh, we're very excited, but we're looking at every segment of sport. Like I was saying, we want to be the platform or solution provider. If anyone in sports, whether they're a league, organizer, team, has any type of payment challenges or friction or pain points, you know, we want to be able to solve their problem and own this entire vertical.
Okay, cool. So, Han, we're doing a new segment, or I'm trying to experiment a new segment. It's done in other podcasts, like a lightning round. So, I have a few quick questions. I want your first instinct response. You could kind of elaborate your response, but kind of a quick response.
Okay.
Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Given you solve compliance, so the reg or the regulation you wish were simpler, KYC, 1099, 1042S, or OFAC?
Oh, KYB for sure.
Oh,
KYB, KYC.
KYC, yeah. Okay. Know your customer, know your business. Pick one, speed or control as a feature of your platform.
I would say control because control affects speed.
Uh-huh. Oh, very smart. Very nice. Most surprising FX lesson learned running global payouts.
Doing cross-border payments is very hard. It's not as easy as people think, especially if you want a global network. Meaning, if you want to be able to pay anyone that's on it from a non-sanctioned country, less popular routes aren't going to be supported by your biggest institutions. You have to work with multiple global financial partners and understand what routes that they have. So my biggest lesson is you got to have multiple partners to enable a global payments network.
Uh-huh. Words of wisdom from somebody who's done it and is in the throes of it. Um, Favorite esports moment you've lived through?
I would have to say going to the IEM in Katowice, Poland. Katowice is not a major metro city. It's this industrial city that takes a hop and another flight to even get there in this point. But the fact that they worked with ESL to organize essentially a city takeover when we do
Wow.
essentially the Olympics of gaming event there, and you got 30 to 50,000 gamers from all over the world flying into this city in Poland, and watching those lines and watching all the international people, and then filling out their biggest sporting venue. It's sold out with lines just wrapped around the building. That's an experience I can't describe. I'm
Wow.
saying that most, other than your major world sports events, every other sports league would be jealous of that type of fan experience and engagement.
Yeah,
It
looks
was
like it. Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I'm saying that was amazing. I mean, I've done big events at Barclays and at different stadiums, in the US, but going on an international where you see, all these foreign, people from all over the world, right? Coming into this city in Poland to celebrate gaming.
Wow. Yeah, so when esports becomes real, meaning people are there physically. So, very interesting. Hot take, NIL in 3 years, bigger, smaller, or consolidated?
It's definitely going to be bigger, but with more consolidation. More regulations and standards are going to put into a consolidation play, and it's going to push out the solutions and I would say participants that aren't going to meet those requirements.
Hmm. And the last one is pickleball going to disrupt racket sports. Pickleball and padel maybe going to disrupt racket sports, including tennis.
Tennis will always be there, right? Because it's one of the majors on a global level. It has way too much history. But who's going to play more, from, let's say, bottom of the pyramid base? Oh, pickleball and paddle will, I saw paddle internationally and of how popular it is. How popular pickleball is in the US, you're seeing that same rabid fan base and the number of people playing paddle in every country outside the US. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no, I agree. They'll all coexist, but yeah, I think the numbers will show that pickle probably grows and paddle or padel as well. Han, we'd love to go on for another hour. This was awesome, but we have to start wrapping up. So in closing, where can folks find you if you want to give out LinkedIn or X or wherever you are on social media? Um, and with that, describe who are you trying to connect with? Are you looking to hire or looking to partner, customers, whoever you're trying to connect with? Go.
Yeah. So, people can find us on our website primarily, which is paymentlabs.io. And then me personally, I do take, inbounds on LinkedIn, where we're really focused on right now, especially after this raise, is on distribution and growth. And our focus is in sports. So what I'm looking to do is connect with, anyone that's part of a sports league or sports team or youth sports, anything sports, and they have payment issues. I want to talk.
Great. Paymentlabs.io and Park, the CEO founder. That's HANPARK. Connect with him on LinkedIn. FinTech Talkers, if you like this, click follow, share with the CFO who's still mailing checks for their sports payouts. And we'll see you next time where we sculpt the future one episode at a time. Thank you, Han.
Thank you, Patty. It was fun.